It was a tense night in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. Captain Ibrahim Traoré was in his office at the presidential palace, analyzing confidential documents about an imminent threat to the government. The country's security was at stake, and he knew that any false step could be costly. Suddenly, his assistant, Marie, entered the room with a grim expression on her face. She carried a sealed envelope in her hands, which she silently handed to Traoré. "Mr. President," she said hesitantly, "this arrived just a few minutes ago. It's urgent." Traoré frowned as he opened the envelope. Inside was a detailed intelligence report that exposed a plot to overthrow him. Among the names of the alleged scammers, one caught his attention: Amadou Diallo, his childhood friend and youth companion. Traoré's heart sank. He felt like he had been punched in the stomach. Amadou was more than a friend. He was a brother. They grew up together in Bondakui, sharing dreams and difficulties. When Traoré took charge of the country after the coup d'etat, he offered Amadou a strategic position in the government, believing they could work together to rebuild Burkina Faso. But now, the evidence was clear. Amadou was involved in a plan to betray him. That can't be true," muttered Traoré, his eyes fixed on Amadou's name on the report. Marie remained silent, allowing him to process the information. She knew how deep the bond between the two men was. "Sir," she said finally, "what do you want to do? Should we mobilize the security forces?" Traoré shook his head. "No, I'll handle it myself." Traoré decided to travel alone to Bobo-Dioulasso, where Amadou was allegedly coordinating the coup plotters. He ignored the recommendations of his generals and security team, who urged him to send an armed task force rather than face the situation personally. "Mr. President," said General Cabaret, worried, "this is extremely dangerous. We don't know how many men we are dealing with." "I'm not going to fight," replied Traoré calmly, adjusting his military jacket. "I'm going to understand, and if possible, resolve this as a brother, not as an enemy." The journey to Bobo-Dioulasso was silent. Traoré drove his own car, lost in thoughts about the past. He remembered the nights when he and Amadou dreamed of a better future for Burkina Faso. How could that same man now be plotting against him? Upon arriving in the city, he headed to a small house on the outskirts, where Amadou had last been seen. When he knocked on the door, he was greeted by a tall, thin man dressed in simple clothes. It was Amadou. "Ibrahim?" said Amadou, surprised to see his friend. "What are you doing here?" Traoré looked at him for a long moment before responding. "I could ask you the same, my brother. Why are you doing this?" Amadou hesitated, visibly uncomfortable. He invited Traoré to enter, closing the door behind them. The room was simple, with little furniture and some old photos on the walls, including one of the two of them in their youth. "You know why I'm doing this," Amadou said finally, sitting down on a worn chair. "Our people are suffering, Ibrahim, and you're so busy trying to save the country that you forgot to listen to the people." Traoré shook his head, frustrated. "I never forgot the people, Amadou. I grew up among them, just like you. But overthrowing the government won't solve our problems. It will only create more chaos." Amadou lowered his eyes, clearly torn between his convictions and the friendship he still felt for Traoré. "I just wanted to help," he murmured. "But no one listens to me, not even you." Traoré sat next to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. If you want to help, then stand by me. Together we can do more than any uprising could." For a moment, there was silence in the room. Amadou seemed to be pondering Traoré's words as tears began to stream down his face. "I was wrong," he finally admitted. "But can I still fix this?" Traoré nodded. "Yes, my brother. We all make mistakes. The important thing is what we do after we recognize them." After the emotional conversation with Amadou, Traoré returned to the presidential palace in Ouagadougou. He was visibly shaken, but determined to make a fair decision about his childhood friend's fate. The meeting room was tense when he entered. The generals and ministers waited anxiously, knowing that the president had faced something personal in Bobo Dioulasso. "Mr. President," said General Caboret, breaking the silence, "what happened there? Should we arrest the conspirators?" Traoré took a deep breath before responding. "Amadou confessed his involvement in the plan," he said, his voice firm but thick with emotion. "But he did not act out of personal ambition. He believed he was helping our people." Those present were silent, surprised by the revelation. Many expected severe punishment for the coup plotters, but Traoré seemed inclined to take a different approach. "I've known him since I was a child," continued Traoré. "He was one of the first to believe in me when I dreamed of changing this country. I can't just dismiss him as an enemy." The Minister of Justice intervened, worried. "Mr. President, this could be seen as weakness. If you spare Amadou, others may interpret this as an opening for future betrayal." Traoré nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I understand your concerns," he said, "but we also need to remember that leadership is not just about punishing, it's about righting wrongs and building bridges." He then announced his decision. Amadou would be removed from his government position and sent to work directly with rural communities, where he could contribute positively. The decision was met with a mix of approval and skepticism. Some ministers applauded Traoré's compassionate approach, while others feared the possible political consequences. The next day, Amadou appeared at the palace to receive his new assignment. He was visibly embarrassed but grateful for the opportunity to make amends for his mistakes. "Ibrahim," he said, his voice breaking, "I don't know if I deserve your trust after what I've done." Traoré placed a hand on his shoulder. "No one is automatically trustworthy, my brother, but everyone deserves a chance to prove themselves again." After making the decision to give Amadou a second chance, Ibrahim Traoré returned to the presidential palace in Ouagadougou. His mind was filled with childhood memories of the nights when he and Amadou dreamed of a better future for Burkina Faso. He knew his decision would be questioned by many, but he also understood that leadership was not just about punishing mistakes, it was about fixing them and building bridges. That night, Traoré walked alone through the palace gardens, reflecting on the personal risks involved in his position. He thought of the hundreds of people who trusted him, who saw in him not just a political leader, but a symbol of hope and dignity. "How can I lead my people if I can't forgive my own brother?" he muttered to himself as he watched the stars in the night sky. Suddenly, he heard soft footsteps behind him. It was Marie, his assistant, who came with a cup of hot tea. "Mr. President," she said gently, "you look tired. Can I help you with anything?" Traoré smiled, appreciating her concern. "Marie, do you ever feel like sometimes doing what's Right is harder than doing what's easy. She nodded, immediately understanding the depth of the question. Yes, sir. But that's exactly why people trust you. Because you take the hard way when necessary. He sighed, feeling a little lighter after sharing his thoughts. I hope you're right, Marie. I hope you're right. The following day, Traoré called an emergency meeting with his cabinet to discuss next steps. He knew that Amadou's betrayal was not an isolated case. There were other coup plotters who needed to be stopped to guarantee the country's security. Gentlemen, he said, looking directly at his ministers and generals, we cannot allow the ambition of the few to compromise the future of the many. Today, we will act firmly, but also justly. The generals nodded, ready to carry out their orders. Traoré then detailed the plan. The coup leaders would be arrested and put on trial, but those who showed genuine repentance would be given the opportunity for redemption, as in the case of Amadou. While security forces carried out the arrests, Traoré decided to visit some of the rural communities that had been impacted by political instability. He wanted to hear directly from citizens how they were handling the situation. In a small village north of Ouagadougou, he found a woman named Fatou who had lost her husband during a previous conflict. She held a faded photo of him as she spoke to Traoré. Mr. President, she said, her voice choked with emotion, I just want my children to grow up in peace. We don't need riches, just security. Traoré placed a hand on his shoulder, deeply touched by the simplicity and sincerity of his words. You have my word, Fatou. We will do everything we can to ensure your children have the future they deserve. Observing the scene, a journalist wrote in his notebook, Today in Burkina Faso, I saw a leader who not only governs, but who listens. A leader who understands that true strength lies in connecting with his people. Fatou walked slowly towards the Innovation Center, his face marked with concern. She had traveled hours from Bobo Dioulasso, carrying with her not only her suitcase, but also the memories of her mother, Marie, who always dreamed of seeing her daughter achieve something greater. Upon arriving, she found a scene she had never imagined. A crowd gathered to celebrate the advances of the Dignity Through Self-Sufficiency program. Marie was there, just as Traoré had described, tears streaming down her face as she coordinated the final details of the ceremony. Malik, the boy who had once fought a fever in a makeshift hospital, now wore a new sweater and smiled beside her, holding a board with photos of local initiatives. Ibrahim Traoré took the stage simply, wearing traditional Burkinabe clothes. He looked at the crowd, visibly moved to see so many lives transformed by the project. Today, he said, his voice thick with emotion, we are not here just to celebrate numbers or public policies. We are here to honor those who built this country with their hands and minds. You are the true pillars of Burkina Faso. He then addressed Trump directly, even though he knew the former American president was not present. Mr. Trump, he said, looking directly into the cameras, you called me naive, but I want you to know that our naivety is changing lives. Our strength is in the small daily victories, in the communities that come together to build a better future. The audience applauded warmly as images of flourishing farmers, children studying in renovated schools, and young scientists developing innovative solutions were projected on the screen. Fatou was invited on stage to speak. She hesitated, For a moment before finding the courage. My mother always taught me that we should fight for our dreams, she said, holding up the old book that had belonged to her mother. Inside it, a simple sentence was written: "Knowledge is the greatest inheritance we can leave." Traoré smiled, deeply touched by the message. He knew this was more than just a memory. It was a reminder that every act of kindness could create big changes. Meanwhile, in the United States, Trump watched the live broadcast with growing, if reluctant, admiration. During a live interview, he was asked again about Traoré. "This guy is something special," Trump admitted, surprising the audience. "He's proving he can do things on his own. Maybe I underestimated him." Trump's statement was widely publicized, further reinforcing the message that gestures of kindness and genuine leadership can unite people from different parts of the world. Back in Burkina Faso, Traoré continued his mission of transformation. During a visit to a small rural village, he met a child named Mamadou, who had received school uniforms and supplies thanks to resources generated by land reform. "Mr. President," she said, her voice shaking with emotion, "this is for you. I wanted to show you that we are using what we have been given to learn." Traoré smiled, deeply touched. "You don't just owe it to us, Mamadou. You're proving that when we give people the right tools, they can conquer the world."